Real questions, real answers for real life. Come on in and pull up a chair. You're at 1850 Main Street with Michael Del Giorno and David Zanotti.
So how can a nonprofit organization get around the rules and attempt to affect the outcome of elections?
Electioneering superweapons. Let's talk about them. That's the way that the Daily Signal talks about what's been going on in the changes in elections and in nonprofit organizations and others getting involved in regards to seeking to influence the outcome of an election. Now, the IRS permits, okay, and that in and of itself is a controversial statement because the IRS doesn't have the right to limit anybody's freedom of speech. But through terrorizing people, and I think I can say that, organizations with the idea that if you do something wrong, you're going to lose your tax-exempt status, which means that donations to your organization will not be tax deductible, and that can have a serious impact in some organizations. The IRS is able to hold sway over people's free speech if they're working from a nonprofit area. All right. Now, that's been going on for a long time. It's been going on since a thing called the Johnson Amendment came into being back in the 60s, where Lyndon Johnson was angry because a specific group of people in his district in regards to his Senate race had been highly influential, and they used their platforms in churches talking about his election. He didn't like that. And so he put in a one-sentence amendment into the tax code that gave the IRS this authority, and it passed on the narrowest of margins. So it's never been reviewed. It's never been reviewed since that time by Congress. They have never taken this on and looked at it, and it's never been challenged the whole way up to the United States Supreme Court. But that's the shadow that IRS fear projects over our election process. And it seems that conservatives and Christians and conservative religious organizations and synagogues and others are far more afraid of the IRS than anybody else, certainly more afraid than the nonprofits that have been founded lately. And what are they? Okay, there's a bunch of new nonprofits because the radical left has discovered a strategy. That strategy is to start up nonprofit organizations that are going to focus on voter participation and get out the vote drives and voter registration. And they mask themselves as good government groups just desiring to do the best they can to help America along. But when you get into studying their funding is all coming from the same network of left-wing activists and billionaires. And when you then study their activities, they're exceptionally targeted to reaching only people that are going to vote for left-wing candidates. So skirting the laws with language, they end up doing precisely what the laws are supposed to stop you from doing, and they do it anyhow. Now, I got to give them a lot of credit for being clever. But let's talk about the kind of money that we're talking about and where does this come from? There's an organization called Arabella Advisors. And Arabella Advisors is an organization that you can look up and you can study and you can learn a lot about, which is a network of people who go around the country and encourage left-wing organizations, foundations, and individuals of high wealth to contribute to these nonprofits for tax deductibility. These nonprofits are usually mostly websites. They kind of bake them like in an easy bake oven, and out they pop. And here comes this website that's got this fanciful name about good citizenship or voter participation or every right to vote, and use all the symbolism that you want. Bottom line is, it's wealthy people that are trying to influence the outcome of an election by putting their money into an organization that's going to target certain communities by design and get voter turnout and do ballot chasing and ballot harvesting and all the things that are necessary to turn the vote in that particular area so that it will multiply into turning the electoral college votes in the state and control the presidency or control the Congress.
That was a good reference of the easy bake oven, by the way. Way to work that. The way to work that in. But
one of my favorites. For those of you that are too young to remember, it's when we would cook things with a light bulb and call it a toy.
Well, and when you look at the areas being targeted and you see what the left has done and the way they micro-target specific counties, specific cities, knowing exactly where they're headed and who they're aiming for, to get to register to vote and to also follow up to make sure they do cast that ballot. When you study it, it's easy to see that they neglect a large, I would say, portion of the respective states that they work in.
So there's a guy named Parker Thayer, who's an analyst with an organization called Capital Research Center. I would encourage everyone that's interested to look at Capital Research Center. They're in Washington, D.C. Go ahead and do an online search for Capital Research Center. They do very high quality research in this arena of elections, campaign funding, and who's got their toes on the line in regards to the rules. So here's a quote from this recent Daily Signal article. Nonpartisan and charitable voter registration and get out the vote groups are the Democrats' party, quote, electioneering superweapons, said Parker Thayer, an analyst with the conservative-oriented Capital Research Center in Washington, D.C. Of these, Thayer sees the Everybody Votes campaign as of paramount importance. Born of a plan commissioned by Hillary Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta, funded by the Democratic Party's biggest donors, and coordinated with cutthroat Democrat consultants, Thayer writes, the Everybody Votes campaign has used the guise of civic-minded charities to selectively register millions of, quote, non-white swing state voters in the hopes of getting out the Democrat vote. Okay, now here's how their methodology. They are funding and training 50 community groups to register voters to close the voter registration gap in communities of color. Okay, so this is from their own materials. Okay, everybody. That's just one. That is just one of these groups. There are some of the largest contributors to these organizations are groups like League of Conservation Voters, Education Fund, the New Venture, Hopewell Funds, and the interesting, the for-profit consulting firm Arabella Advisors. And that firm, Arabella Advisors, goes around and seeks to encourage wealthy left-wing people to invest their money in certain ideas and projects, and then to contribute monies in charitable contributions into these kinds of organizations for what they call voter education, voter registration. But it's crystal clear that these are left-wing organizations funded in strategic states only, and they're doing it with billions of dollars.
Yeah, very strategic states. When you look at the 8 they operated in from 2016 to 2019, they would be the 8 you would think that, again, air quotes on radio, swing states. And then they did expand a little bit in 2021 because they knew there were a few states that were a little closer than they thought they would be in 16 and in 20. So it's only operating in a certain area of the country as well.
Okay, get this one. This article continues. One notable backer of the Everybody Votes campaign is Mind the Gap. What an incredibly clever name. All right, Mind the Gap, a Moneyball-style Silicon Valley Democratic super PAC founded by Stanford law professor Barbara Fried and connected to the political activities of her convicted crypto fraudster son, Sam Bankman-Fried. Right? The analytics-focused outfit prepared a confidential strategy memo leaked in advance of the 2020 election, noting that the 501c3 voter registration focused on underrepresented groups in the electorate would be the single most effective tactic for ensuring Democratic victories, 4 to 10 times more cost-effective on an after-tax basis at garnering additional Democratic votes relative to alternatives like broadcast media and digital buys. Interpret that, Rob. What does that mean?
Well, they are targeting specific people with advertising because they know how they can get directly to your computer, to your phone, to your cable box, however they need to get you. They're going to, on the likelihood that if you do vote, they know who you're going to vote for, and they're going to target specifically you.
These people are throwing around huge contributions. $24 million from 2016 to 2021 to a group called State Voices. And again, what they're doing is they have full-time professional for-profit people at Arabella Advisors going around creating these networks and creating these revenue pools to influence the outcome of elections. This is not the Democrat Party doing it.
No, but as it says, not the Democrat Party, but garnering additional Democratic votes. That's the goal. In essence, they are the arm of the party that isn't connected to the body.
Thanks for stopping by at 1850 Main Street. We're glad you're here. Do you want to learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy? Tune in to the Public Square on over 200 radio stations coast to coast, or download the free Public Square mobile app from your app store. Just look for The Lamppost. Find out what America's talking about at thepublicsquare.com.
All right, the article goes on. According to the Capital Research Center, the Everybody Votes campaign would collect and spend over $50 million in connection with the 2022 midterm elections. All right, this is the most recent period for which the financials are available. All told, since its founding in 2015, the campaign says its network has registered 5.1 million voters, of whom 76% are people of color, 56% are women, and 47% are under the age of 35. How convenient. Now, they're literally quantifying all of this to fit into their targeting, adding hundreds of millions of dollars to it, and mobilizing out into key swing states in key neighborhoods. Now, at this point in time, there's a temptation to say, well, the way you're projecting this, they're doing something wrong. Guess what? They're not doing anything wrong. They're not breaking any laws.
They're putting their money where their mouth is.
They're putting hundreds of millions of dollars into getting exactly what they want. Now, we can argue, and lawyers might argue, though I doubt that this Justice Department would even entertain a complaint, let alone the IRS entertain a complaint, that they're guilty of targeting. And the reason that they can do the targeting is because they're targeting groups that are protected. If someone, now we could get into the hypocrisy of the whole thing, but even that's not the point. Like, as if there was $100 billion in conservative money that went into basically targeting people only older than 55, only with certain incomes, only certain racial profiles, only attending certain organizations or certain educational backgrounds or churches or synagogues. We could get into all kinds of, suddenly it would become targeting and it would become highly controversial. Forget the hypocrisy. That's so obvious. That's easy. The fact of the matter is, forget the laws. Maybe there shouldn't be any laws regarding free speech and voter registration and voter information at all. The point is, whether there were laws or no laws, these people are doing it, and they're doing it completely independent, but for the benefit of the Democrat Party. And I think it's a fair question to ask, why is it that these people are so much more committed to filling the spots of civil government than conservatives are?
Especially when it comes to writing those large checks and understanding that's going to be spread out into different organizations for people to have different strategies and the way to implement those strategies. I think that's one thing we've seen on the far left through the years, especially if you go back as far as the Obama campaigns. They knew what they were doing as far as micro-targeting goes. They knew where to look for votes and how to go get those votes. And they're willing to do it and pay for the boots on the ground to do it.
Now, as if this isn't stacked with enough bad news, if you're a conservative, let's add another piece to the equation, and that's Silicon Valley. All right, Mark Zuckerberg is the lead dog with what's known as a thing called Zuckerbucks. Now, Zuckerbucks are an affectionate term for how the Zuckerberg Foundation is funneling money directly into targeted states, into the electoral process, like as in supporting boards of elections and other offices, official state offices in regards to elections, to, quote, create let's paraphrase it, to create an atmosphere of excellence, to make sure that everything is done according to the way that it should be done. According to whose terms? So you've got all kinds of money coming in from Zuckerberg into key targeted states to enhance this process of voter registration and voter participation. So, and again, it's just, interestingly enough, only going into targeted states that turn the Electoral College in regards to the presidency, or only going into areas that could influence the outcome of certain congressional races. So it is also money that's being targeted to amplify the progressive left's political goals. And it's hundreds of millions of dollars flowing in as well.
And when you talk about Mark Zuckerberg, we know the information that he controls and how he can either push the envelope or throttle that info down, pull down on it to limit who sees what on certain social media platforms that his company helps run. So what, from a monetary value, what is that worth?
You know, the best way to understand Silicon Valley and what's going on there is to take a look. If you were to do a campaign, and we recently, well, first off, before we get into that, do you remember that ballot issue campaign that showed up in Ohio a few years ago?
Yeah.
That Zuckerberg was a part of?
Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, yes.
What were they doing in Ohio?
They thought it would be a test case, I guess, on some judicial prison type reform. And they tried to do a constitutional amendment in the state of Ohio, and they were defeated. But that was a big fight because you're dealing with a social media giant that was committed to spending tens of millions of dollars to try and buy a piece of the Constitution. They showed up there as a test case to see what they could do, knowing that Ohio would be an uphill battle to win.
So Zuckerberg's operation and his money showed up in Ohio. They gathered all the signatures, paid for the signature gathering, placed the measure on the ballot. That's millions of dollars. Then they ran the campaign completely independent of either political party. They ran a campaign for a constitutional amendment and did all of the advertising through social media. It's as if they decided to run a test case as if they were in control of how the Constitution would be altered in a major Midwestern swing state. They did it start to finish. Now, they got their heads handed to them from the voters. Nobody bought what they were selling, but it was almost as if it didn't matter because they proved that they could single-handedly run a campaign such as that. And obviously, money was no object. They could move it from start to finish. It was as if they were running a test case just to see everything that they could learn on how much power they could implement. That's one thing. So in 2023, we were involved in a ballot issue campaign in Ohio. And that ballot issue campaign involved lots of necessary advertising across social media. Now, American Policy Roundtable has every right as a nonprofit to do that because you're allowed to operate on ballot issues. We don't touch candidate campaigns. We don't touch political parties. We don't endorse anybody. But we do get involved in the idea realm of ballot issues in constitutional language we have for 44 years. And so we were up against a giant in regards to big pharma and the abortion industry. So we were trying to reach people through social media, which means we were going to make buys on all of the traditional social media and streaming video and all of those content, whatever terms you want to use, methodologies of technology. Do you know there was not a single ad buy that we placed on Facebook that Zuckerberg's people didn't try to stop? Not one.
It wasn't easy. It was a fight.
Every time we filed a new set of ads, they shut them down. Every time we tried to, now this was the conduct of a campaign inside one state. And so everything was targeted inside one state. Now, how do you not? I mean, why would I want to advertise in Pennsylvania and Indiana if the ballot issue is only in Ohio? They shut us down on all kinds of algorithms nonstop. Now, remember, these are the people who a few years prior to that waltzed through the state and did whatever they wanted to do on their own platforms to try to alter the Constitution. When somebody else comes up and tries to have an opinion on something like that, they get shut down by these people. They don't play fair. They don't believe in playing according to the rules. They believe that they make the rules. So you've got Arabella advisors and billionaires dropping in billions of dollars into nonprofits, and you've got Silicon Valley and the social media club coming in, and whether you're talking about Google ads or you're talking about Facebook or you're talking about streaming video and audio, you have all kinds of controls slanted against conservative messaging and billions of dollars flying across those same channels for the progressive left. Now, this is two straight 1850 conversations in a row that are bad news. But wait, it gets worse. One more round of coffee on this subject, because there's another piece of this puzzle you're not going to believe.
The conversations are just getting started. To get connected, check out 1850mainstreet.com. And if you want more, check out Your Morning Show and The Public Square. Your Morning Show is where you can hear Michael and David talking about the stories of the day every day. And you can learn more about what's really going on behind the scenes in public policy at The Public Square. You can listen to Your Morning Show and The Public Square on the iHeart mobile app and on radio stations across the country. Subscribe today so you don't miss a single conversation. We'll see you next time here at 1850 Main Street.